In 1758, a French scholar named Jean-Jacques Barthélemy looked at battered inscriptions and coins and did what time itself had taken away. He made the Phoenician alphabet speak again, but even that victory came with a twist. The script had been known, in fragments, for a long time, yet its relation to the Phoenicians was unknown until the 19th century. Until then, many assumed it was simply a direct variation of Egyptian hieroglyphs. The real drama is not in a Paris study. It is on wind-cut coasts, in crowded harbors, and in the shadow of city walls where messengers ran and merchants bargained. This alphabet was never meant to be sacred. It was meant to be used. In that world, writing was heavy. It was slow. It was elite. Cuneiform demanded long training. Egyptian hieroglyphs demanded even more. Yet the Phoenician alphabet is an ancient alphabet we know today because Canaanite and Aramaic inscriptions were left across the Mediterranean region, marks that survived shipwrecks, wars, and decay. It was used to write early Iron Age Canaanite languages such as Phoenician, Hebrew, Ammonite, Edomite, and Old Aramaic, and it carried a quiet revolution, a regulated alphabetic script, written from right to left, not drifting in many directions like older systems. Regulated matters. In trade, a mark that looks different in every port is a mark that cannot be trusted. In war, an order that can be misread is an order that can kill your own men. Only a few surviving texts written in the Phoenician language remain. Before around 1000 BC, Phoenician was written using cuneiform symbols common across Mesopotamia. So the alphabet did not arrive fully formed. It emerged under pressure, in a place that had learned to borrow and adapt. Closely related to Hebrew, Phoenician appears to be a direct continuation of Proto-Canaanite script, the earliest trace of alphabetic writing, coming out of the Bronze Age collapse period. Then the evidence turns up in a brutal place, on weapons. Inscriptions dating from c. 1100 BC, found on arrowheads near Bethlehem, demonstrate the missing link between Proto- or Old Canaanite writing and the later alphabetic system. An arrowhead is made for speed. So is a practical alphabet. Egypt's imprint is all over the transition. Egypt controlled Phoenicia for a long time, and Phoenician language and culture absorbed that influence. Though Phoenician was once written in cuneiform, the first signs of the formalized alphabet were clearly derived from hieroglyphs. You can feel the connection in the 14th century tablets known as the El Amarna letters, messages written by Canaanite kings to pharaohs Amenephis III, 1402–1364 BC, and Akhenaton, 1364–1347 BC. The Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is a world that runs on diplomacy, tribute, and threat. In that world, speed is power. The Phoenician alphabet would later be called the early linear script because it drove a hard shift away from pictographic Proto- or Old Canaanite writing into alphabetic linear scripts. It tightened the rules. It standardized the marks. It made writing look like a tool you could carry. Crucially, it pulled away from multi-directional writing and held to horizontal and right to left, though some examples show boustrophodon. Even the exceptions hint at people testing what worked on stone, wood, and papyrus. And then the system shows its sharpest edge. It is phonetic. One sound, one symbol. Compared to cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs, with their many complex characters controlled by a trained elite, this demanded only a few dozen symbols to learn. If a skill can be learned in seasons instead of years, it stops being a wall. It becomes a doorway. We see that doorway in one of the most famous artifacts tied to Phoenician writing, the sarcophagus of King Ahiram in Byblos, Lebanon. It is often dated to around 850 BC, preserving a fully developed Phoenician script carved into stone. Scholars debate the exact dating. Some arguments push it closer to c. 1000 BC, yet the point stays the same. By the early Iron Age, The alphabet is no longer a rough experiment. It is mature. A sarcophagus is a final warning. The alphabet becomes the blade of that warning, cut into limestone for anyone to read, if they can. And here is the twist. The same simplicity that served kings also armed ordinary people. Phoenician merchants carried the script across the Mediterranean world, spreading it outside the Canaanite sphere. The alphabet moved like cargo. It followed timber, dye, metal, and grain. It rode beside promises and debts. Wherever it landed, it carried the same message. You can learn this. That message could shake the old order. Its ease of use meant common people could quickly learn to read and write it, disrupting literacy as the guarded property of elites and scribes. Some kingdoms, Adiabene, Assyria, and Babylonia, kept cuneiform for formal matters well into the Common Era, like commanders refusing to give up heavier armor. When a new tool threatens an old hierarchy, the hierarchy rarely steps aside. This is where the next chapter begins. Because once the alphabet is portable, once it belongs to traders as much as kings, it starts to split into new forms, new identities, and new empires of ink. From the 9th century BC onward, adaptations such as Greek, Old Italic, and Anatolian scripts will thrive. By the 8th century BC, non-Phoenician authors will be writing in the Phoenician alphabet in northern Syria and southern Asia Minor. And when later generations speak of the Second Temple era, 516 BC 70 AD, or when Carthage holds on to the Punic alphabet until the 2nd century BC, the letters will already have lives far beyond the cities that first shaped them. Part 2 follows those letters as they leave Phoenicia behind and start remaking the wider Mediterranean in their own image. What happens next is bigger than trade and bigger than any single city, because once these letters step onto imperial roads, they begin to work like the nervous system of empires, and that is where Part 3 is headed. But first, the alphabet has to cross the sea. From the 9th century BC, adaptations of the Phoenician alphabet began to thrive. Greek, Old Italic, and Anatolian scripts branching like new roots drawn over familiar water. This was not an accident. It was a perfect match between a tool and an age. Phoenician merchants already moved through the Mediterranean like a tide, and their script moved with them. In port cities, speed is authority. A ship's captain needs tallies. A trader needs contracts. A temple needs offerings recorded. A commander needs orders copied cleanly, fast, and the same way every time. Phoenician delivered that kind of discipline. It had strict rules. It was horizontal and right to left, even if a few surviving texts show boustrophodon, like a plow turning back and forth across a field. It was phonetic. One sound matched one symbol. Phoenician proper used 22 consonant letters, leaving vowel sounds implicit. That choice made perfect sense in a Semitic language world. Many words hang on consonant roots. The vowels can be guessed, meaning holds. But in Greek, meaning often lives inside the vowels. Remove them and the word can collapse. So when the Phoenician script reached Greek speakers, most scholars place that adoption in the late 9th or early 8th century BC. The Greeks did something that looks small but changes everything. They turned some Phoenician consonant signs into vowels, creating the earliest alphabetic system that systematically wrote vowel sounds as well as consonants. This was not just clever. It was survival for the language on the page, and the Greeks remembered the moment as a story. Herodotus claimed that Phoenicians who came with Cadmus brought the alphabet into Hellas, and that the Greeks then changed both the sound and the form of the letters over time. Modern scholarship argues over the legend's details, but what matters is the footprint it leaves behind. Even in Greek memory, the letters arrive by contact, by movement, by people who travel. Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Once Greek communities had their adapted alphabet, The change rippled outward, not inward. Greek writing could now spread with Greek ships. It could land in foreign markets and still be taught. And because it came from Phoenician roots, it carried something else with it, a kind of compatibility. A family resemblance that made borrowing easier, faster, and safer than inventing from nothing. That is how the alphabet marched into Italy. Old Italic scripts ultimately derived from Phoenician, but most evidence points to a path through Greek, especially the Euboean variant carried by Greek colonies such as Cumae and Ischia in the 8th century BC. This matters because it shows the alphabet behaving like currency. It changes hands. It is accepted because it is already trusted somewhere else. Each new culture tweaks it for its own sounds, then passes it forward. Over time, the old Italic family becomes a bridge toward later systems, including the Latin alphabet. So when you look at a modern Latin letter, you are not seeing a single invention. You are seeing a relay, Phoenician to Greek, Greek to Italy, Italy to the wider world. A chain pulled tight across centuries, yet the Western spread is only half the story. To the south and west, Phoenician proper lived a second life in ancient Carthage, where it was used as the Punic alphabet right up until the 2nd century BC. Carthage was not a footnote, it was a sea power, a rival, a commercial machine, and it needed writing that could move as fast as ships and as far as influence. Punic served that purpose as a Western Phoenician voice, used across Carthage and its Mediterranean network. Even after Carthage fell, Punic did not simply vanish overnight. Languages that serve trade and daily life tend to linger in the mouths of ordinary people long after flags change. Meanwhile, the Phoenician alphabet also left a deep mark on social structure wherever it arrived. Its ease of use compared to other systems meant common people could learn to read and write it quickly, and that was dangerous in the Old World. Literacy had been a gate, a class barrier, a monopoly held by scribes and elites, reinforced by systems like cuneiform and complex hieroglyphic traditions. But an alphabet that can be learned without a lifetime of training turns that gate into a door. And when doors open, power reacts. Possibly in part because of this disruption, several Middle Eastern kingdoms, Adiabene, Assyria, and Babylonia, continued to use cuneiform for formal matters well into the Common Era. Think of it as institutional armor. Heavy, prestigious, hard to replace. Even when lighter gear proves faster, some commanders still trust the old weight. At the same time, a new rival script family grew in the Near East. The Aramaic alphabet was especially successful, and it would go on to develop into later scripts, such as Jewish square script. Historically, Aramaic writing emerges from Phoenician roots, with early Aramaic inscriptions using the Phoenician alphabet, and the distinct Aramaic alphabet forming by the 8th century BC. That matters because Aramaic becomes more than a local script. It becomes a regional connector, useful across different peoples, courts, and markets. This is also where memory and identity enter the alphabet's story. The Phoenician alphabet was known to Jewish sages of the Second Temple era, 516 BC 70 AD, who referred to it as Old Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew script. In other words, the letters were not only practical, they were ancestral. They carried continuity. They could signal tradition even when politics changed and empires rose and fell. By the 8th century BC, non-Phoenician authors were already using the Phoenician alphabet in northern Syria and southern Asia Minor. That is the clearest sign that the alphabet had become bigger than its birthplace. Once outsiders write in your letters no longer belong to you, they belong to the road. And that is exactly where we end this part. Because in the next stage, the most important story is not what the alphabet looks like. It is what it does when empires adopt it, how Aramaic rises, how scripts transform into administrative weapons, and how a merchant's tool becomes a system that can command millions. Soon, the Greeks will take these signs and reshape them into the alphabet that still fills our screens. But first, the letters have to win a harsher war on land, inside courts, temples, and the minds of ordinary people. Long before the alphabet became famous, writing in the Eastern Mediterranean was heavy and expensive. It moved at the pace of training, not at the pace of life. That is why the early Phoenician breakthrough matters so much. It did not just change how people wrote. It changed who was allowed to write. The roots of that change reach back into a world that still spoke in older systems. Before around 1000 BC, Phoenician was written using cuneiform symbols common across Mesopotamia. That single detail tells you everything about the pressure Phoenicia lived under. When you borrow a script from the great powers, you also borrow their habits, their bureaucracy, their way of controlling information. Yet the shift toward an alphabet did not come out of nowhere. Closely related to Hebrew, Phoenician appears to be a direct continuation of Proto-Canaanite script, the earliest trace of alphabetic writing, rising out of the Bronze Age collapse period. And the proof is not preserved in a palace archive. It survives on the kind of object a soldier might hold for only a few seconds. Inscriptions dating from c. 1100 BC, found on arrowheads near Bethlehem, demonstrate the missing link between Proto- or Old Canaanite writing and the later alphabetic system. An arrowhead does not forgive mistakes. If you carve a mark on it, you are carving for speed, for clarity, for purpose. That is exactly the mindset an alphabet rewards. Egypt's long shadow shaped this story too. Egypt controlled Phoenicia for a long time, and Phoenician language and culture absorbed that influence. Though Phoenician was once written in cuneiform, the first signs of the more formalized Phoenician alphabet were clearly derived from hieroglyphs. Evidence appears in the 14th century tablets known as the El Amarna letters, written by Canaanite kings to pharaohs Amenephis III, 1402–1364 BC, and Akhenaton, 1364–1347 BC. These are not casual notes. They are messages shaped by fear, loyalty, and survival. They show a region learning to communicate under pressure, and pressure always favors the simpler tool. By around 850 BC, the alphabet is no longer a rough experiment. One of the best examples of fully developed Phoenician script is engraved on the sarcophagus of King Ahiram in Byblos, Lebanon. Stone is slow. Stone is final. If you carve your letters into stone, you believe those letters will matter after you are gone. And then comes the strange modern echo of this ancient moment. In spite of the historical sources, the Phoenician alphabet was only finally deciphered in 1758 by French scholar Jean-Jacques Barthélemy. Even then, its relation to the Phoenicians was unknown until the 19th century. Until then, it was believed to be a direct variation of Egyptian hieroglyphs, so the alphabet's story is bookended by the same theme. People can see the marks, but they underestimate the system behind them. That system is discipline. The Phoenician alphabet is notable for strict rules. It has been called the early linear script because it developed pictographic Proto- or Old Canaanite script into alphabetic linear scripts. It also made a transfer away from multi-directional writing systems. It was strictly written in horizontal and right to left, though some texts show it was sometimes written left to right, in Boustrophodon. This is what a practical culture invents. Not beauty first, not mystery first, reliability first. Then comes the feature that turns writing into a weapon anyone can pick up. It was phonetic. One sound was represented by one symbol. Phoenician proper consisted of 22 consonant letters only, leaving vowel sounds implicit. Unlike cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs, which used many complex characters and so stayed restricted to a small elite, Phoenician required only a few dozen symbols to learn. That difference is the gap between a guarded fortress and an open gate. And once the gate opens, society changes. The Phoenician alphabet had significant and long-term effects on the social structures of civilizations that came into contact with it. Its spread was driven by the maritime trading culture of Phoenician merchants, who carried it into parts of northern Africa and southern Europe. Merchants are not just sellers. They are carriers of habits. When they arrive, they bring scales, contracts, and the expectation that a mark should mean the same thing today and tomorrow. Its ease of use meant common people could quickly learn to read and write it. That disrupted literacy as something exclusive to elites and scribes who used their monopoly on the skill to control the masses. This is the moment many histories skip because it is quiet. There is no single battle, no famous siege, just a slow shift in who can record a debt, who can copy a law, who can leave a message that survives a single voice. And power does not like its secrets becoming portable. Possibly in part because of that disruption, Middle Eastern kingdoms such as Adiabene, Assyria, and Babylonia continued to use cuneiform for more formal matters well into the Common Era. They were clinging to an older kind of control. The script itself becomes a barrier again. If the writing is difficult, fewer people can challenge what it says. But the alphabet does not stop moving. It splits. It adapts. It survives by changing shape. The Phoenician alphabet proper was used in ancient Carthage as the Punic alphabet right up until the 2nd century BC. Carthage needed a script that could ride with commerce and command across distance. Punic did that. It kept the Phoenician lineage alive in a new political body with new ambitions on the western sea lanes. Elsewhere, the alphabet was already branching into different national alphabets, including the Samaritan and Aramaic, several Anatolian scripts, and early Greek alphabets. This branching is not disorder. It is proof of success. A script that no one wants does not diversify. A script that people depend on becomes many scripts. In the Near East, that success story has a name. The Aramaic alphabet was especially successful, and it went on to be developed into other scripts, such as Jewish square script. In the 9th century BC, the Aramaeans used the Phoenician alphabet and added symbols for the initial aleph and for long vowels, changes that, through later branches and transformations, feed into the long lineage that leads toward what we recognize as modern-day Arabic today. The key point is not a single straight line. The key point is influence. Aramaic becomes a powerful channel, a script designed to travel across peoples who do not share the same blood or the same gods, but do share the need to understand each other. That is why the alphabet also becomes a battleground of identity. The Phoenician alphabet was known to Jewish sages of the Second Temple era, 516 BC 70 AD, who referred to it as Old Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew script. When a community names a script old, they are doing more than describing it. They are placing it inside memory. They are telling you it carries inheritance, not just information. And by the 8th century BC, something even more revealing happens. Texts written by non-Phoenician authors in the Phoenician alphabet begin to appear in northern Syria and southern Asia Minor. This is the moment the letters truly leave home. Not when merchants carry them, not even when kings carve them, but when outsiders adopt them and make them their own. Because once your enemy, your rival, or your neighbor writes in your letters, those letters are no longer a regional trick. They are a shared infrastructure, a system that can bind the Mediterranean world together without asking anyone's permission. And that takes us to the next turning point. In Part 4, we follow the alphabet into Greece, where Herodotus will claim that Phoenician prince Cadmus introduced the Phoenician letters, and where those borrowed signs will be reshaped into the Greek alphabet that later underpins the modern Latin alphabet.